Trump spent years selling one image of himself in war: the guy who never gets cornered, never needs help, and always makes the other side blink first. Then the Iran conflict turned that image inside out. Because here's the exact incident. After backing a war that helped push the Strait of Hormuz into crisis, Trump publicly called on other countries, including allies and major energy-dependent powers like China, to help secure the waterway. But key governments did not rush in. Germany ruled out military participation, Japan said the bar was too high, the EU did not expand its mission, and even Trump's own public claims that help was on the way came with no clear list of who was actually showing up. Al Jazeera. And that's why this story hits so hard politically. Because the tables really did turn. Trump backed escalation, then ended up needing the very kind of coalition support he acts like he can command by instinct. Instead, the world looked at the risk, looked at the mission, looked at Trump, and started backing away. Not loudly in every case, not with some dramatic anti-American speech, just with distance, hesitation, and diplomatic language that basically meant the same thing. Not like this, Al Jazeera. And there are three reasons that happened. First, Trump turned a show of strength moment into a dependence moment. Second, other countries saw a war with huge risk and blurry limits. And third, the people he expected to help had every reason to think they would inherit the danger while Trump kept control of the headlines. That's the whole story. Start with the first reason. Trump's war image depends on the idea that he forces outcomes, he pressures, he threatens, he sets deadlines, he talks like the world moves when he snaps his fingers. But in this conflict, the visual flipped. AP reported today that Trump extended his deadline to Iran by 5 days after saying there had been productive talks, even as Iranian officials denied those talks were happening. At the same time, reporting from last week showed him urging others to help restore navigation through Hormuz, because the crisis was now affecting global trade and energy flows. AP News. That's the concrete example. He went from projecting control to publicly needing buy-in. And here's the punchline. The second you start a fight and then need other people to stabilize the fallout, you stop looking like the guy in charge and start looking like the guy who mispriced the bill. That's where the karma angle comes from. Not some mystical payback, strategic payback. The same Trump who built political oxygen out of mocking alliances and acting like partners were freeloaders suddenly needed those same partners to help manage a dangerous waterway at the center of the global economy. And when they didn't line up, the image cracked. Al Jazeera. Now go to the second reason, because this is where the refusal becomes rational. Other countries looked at the Iran war and saw a mission with all the danger of escalation and none of the clarity of a clean objective. Secure the Strait of Hormuz sounds simple until you ask the real questions. For how long? Under whose command? Against what level of retaliation? And what happens if escort duty turns into direct confrontation with Iran? Reporting from Al Jazeera showed that governments were explicitly resisting military involvement, with Japan saying the threshold was too high and no country openly confirming Trump's claim that warships were coming. Al Jazeera. That's the concrete example for reason 2. The ask sounded urgent, but the mission looked open-ended. And here's the punchline. Countries will tolerate risk for a clear objective. They do not volunteer for a moving target wrapped in somebody else's deadline. That's what Trump ran into. The world was not just judging whether Iran was dangerous. It was judging whether Trump's way of handling the crisis was disciplined enough to join. And a lot of governments clearly decided the answer was no. Because once the objective is fuzzy, the burden sharing starts looking fake. America makes the big calls, everyone else shares the blowback. That is not an attractive offer. Al Jazeera. Now, here's the third reason, and this is the most brutal one. A lot of countries likely concluded that helping Trump here could cost them more than it would help them. Europe had domestic political reasons to avoid a deeper war role. Asian economies had every reason to want shipping stability, but not necessarily by joining a military mission that could widen the conflict. And China, which Trump publicly suggested should help because it depends heavily on Gulf oil, had no obvious reason to jump into an American-led security effort during a war it didn't start and couldn't control. Al Jazeera. That's the concrete example. Even countries with huge exposure to Hormuz still hesitated. And here's the punchline. When even the countries that need the route most won't buy your plan, that usually means the problem isn't the route, it's the plan. That is the tables turn moment right there. Trump tried to frame the crisis like everyone else had to step up. But from the outside, a lot of leaders likely saw something else. America and Israel pushed the conflict to a higher level, and now the rest of the world was being asked to help contain the consequences. That is not leadership to them, that is liability transfer. Al Jazeera. Now, to be fair, there is a counterpoint, and it matters. Countries do not always refuse military participation because they distrust one leader personally. Some refusals are about law, mandate limits, military readiness, parliamentary politics, or a simple desire to avoid mission creep. That is real. And even now, there are mediation efforts involving countries like Oman, Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan, while markets reacted positively when Trump extended his deadline, which suggests some governments still want off-ramps rather than open rupture. AP News. But that counterpoint only goes so far, because procedure does not explain the whole picture. Timing does, optics do, trust does. If Trump had launched this crisis and then effortlessly rallied a visible coalition, that would tell you one story. What happened instead tells you another. He projected dominance, then found himself asking for backup, while allies and major powers calculated the risk and kept their hands half off the wheel. Al Jazeera. And this is why the phrase hit by karma lands so hard with a U.S. audience. Americans have watched Trump market himself for years as the anti-quagmire, anti-weakness, anti-dependence figure, the guy who gets better deals, the guy foreign leaders fear, not manage. But in this war, the image reversed. He became the one imposing deadlines while also needing outside help. He became the one talking strength while the shipping crisis kept proving that military escalation creates its own dependency chain. He became the one demanding movement while others slowed down and made him sit with the consequences. AP News. And that reversal matters beyond one news cycle. Because power in a war is not just about who can strike, it's about who can make support feel safe, necessary, and worth the cost. Trump could still threaten. He could still posture. He could still move forces. But what this episode exposed is that pressure is not the same thing as coalition control. That's the clip. Pressure gets noise. Trust gets commitment. And when you lose the second one, the first one starts sounding hollow. So the clean recap is simple. Trump backed a war that helped turn Hormuz into a global pressure point. Then he asked other countries to help fix the fallout. But the world didn't answer the way he needed. Why? Because his image of control collided with visible dependence, because the mission looked dangerous and undefined, and because too many countries thought joining would mean inheriting risk without owning strategy. Al Jazeera. That's why this feels like karma in war. Not because the universe chose a side, because strategy did. And the one question now is the only one that matters. Did the world just reject Trump's plan, or did it reject Trump himself?